If you traveled to a village in my imaginary river basin, you would find these trees growing all over the place, which the locals call tawe, and every year they produce an abundant crop of hairy fruit, which grow on their trunks. Those fruit are called matnusli, and their wild varieties look like this, so the long filaments are the result of thousands of years of cultivation. They are harvested before they ripen, right after the filaments have grown to their full length, after which the filaments are removed and dried out in the sun. The fruit themselves are used as a vegetable. They are peeled and cut in half, the seeds in the core are removed, and just as raw bananas, they can be either fried or boiled. You can think of them as potatoes that grow on trees, since their flavor is about that bland and inoffensive, though the hairy fruit are 2 times more starchy than your average potato, and they don't preserve as well as potatoes do, so they are only available during the middle of summer. But if they are left on the tree to ripen, they will turn black, the filaments will become brittle and unusable, and the fruit inside will be soft and sweet, which is when monkeys might show up to steal them. But getting back to those filaments that we've left to dry out in the sun, they are called mide, and once dry they can be spun into thread, which is also called mide, and which has many uses, weaving it into fabric being one of them. The thread can be used undyed to make brown fabric, or it could be dyed black, which immediately makes it much more fancy, though the black dye that's used fades pretty fast when exposed to the sun. For something even more fancy, either the unspun filaments of the thread can be soaked in citrus fruit juice for a few days, which will make it bright red, but the fabric made from this red thread can only be worn by the aristocracy. But the weaving thread made from the filaments of the hairy fruit, be it brown or black or red, is usually not used to make monocolor clothing. I omit these details in my drawings because I don't want these videos to kill me, but people usually combine this thread with thread that's made from a flax-like plant and that can be dyed to be any available color to weave patterns in the fabric. And the 2 most commonly woven things are 2 more or less standard sizes of fabric. One is a rectangle that is twice as long as it is wide, and is called kifesli. It can be worn as a dress, wrapped in the manner shown on screen, and it can be worn as a cloak, or used as a blanket. The second size is a really long rectangle, and it's called ki'okkahla. The word comes from the old phrase hokuke halileha, which meant completed weaving or entire weaving, and which then got abbreviated to hokukali, and with time became hokkale. These pieces of cloth are used as a standard measure of a person's wealth. So the collective prefix sa, which is also a word that means 5 and hand, was used to form the word sa'okkahla, which refers to the entirety of somebody's wealth. And when there's a word referring to a collection of something which was made using the prefix sa, there also tends to be a word referring to an individual item belonging to that group, formed using the prefix ki. So people took the word hokkale and formed ki'okkahla, which means exactly the same thing as the word it was derived from. And these long pieces of cloth are not only used as a measure of wealth, they are also worn as clothing, mostly by the aristocracy. Women start off by wrapping the end of the cloth around their waist like a skirt. Then they have someone bring the loose end upwards to their shoulder, where it's folded and the folds are pinned. Those folds can look several different ways, I'm showing only one type here. And it's all repeated at the next shoulder. Then the fabric goes underneath the armpit and back up to the shoulder, where it's folded and pinned and becomes connected to the fabric in the back. The same is repeated at the next shoulder, and the loose end then travels underneath the armpit and to the back, where it's inserted into the fold and everything is pinned again. And the outfit is complete. Men start off the same, by forming a skirt, but then they bring the rest of the fabric around the back and to the front, because men dress up on their own, and all that folding and pinning would be too much of a pain with no one to help out. Which is not to say that they couldn't do some of that if they felt like it. And finally, those long pieces of fabric are also part of a yearly tribute that the aristocratic houses send to the capital. The amount of fabric they need to send is calculated based on the amount of peasant households they have on their land, because the peasants are the ones growing and harvesting the crops from which weaving thread is spun. And when peasants weave those longer pieces of fabric, it's usually not for them to keep to themselves. So while the word for those longer pieces came from a phrase that meant complete weaving, the word for the shorter pieces comes from the verb that means to wear, because the shorter pieces of fabric are the ones the peasants do wear, while the longer ones are the ones they don't.